welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 50, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. I am your host, OldManStompy, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And PyroJackFrost.
Nice. So this is the big 5-0. Vice decided that he had better things to do than spend the evening with us.
For our half-centennial.
You know, this is one thing I did not take into account is, like, with you as host, the snark on Vice is going to be friggin' endless.
Well, all I can say is that I hope that someone gets me something as nice for my 50th birthday as a week without Andrew.
A great big bushy beard.
Although I can say that I'm sure, although he's in a better place this week, I can look in the sky and
he's not dead.
A transparent image of Vice giving us the thumbs up and smiling.
He appears on the moon, and we smile and cry slightly.
Unfortunately, if he does die in the next week, boy, will there be egg on my face.
Yeah. Wow, man, stop.
Anyway,
I can't believe you joke about something like that.
Anyway, we have a lot to talk about that has nothing to do with Vice.
We should say that we're going to cut it out of the podcast and just keep saying that when we're not cutting anything out.
Oh, yeah, I love that. We're cutting this. It just plays.
That'll play on YouTube for sure. All right, so Pyro, why don't you tell us what you've been up to this week?
All right, so I'm going to start with probably the most obvious thing, that the Steam sale started on, I believe, Friday or yesterday, meaning Saturday. Does anyone know when it actually started?
I cannot confirm or deny. I know that I made purchases on it on Friday, so for all intents and purposes, that's when the flood started.
It started on Friday for me.
Yes. So I bought quite a bit. It's actually kind of funny because I, for a while, have decided I'm not going to buy anything else on Steam sales because I have way too many games already. But I heard that Shadows of Mordor was only $4 for everything.
Wow.
The Game of the Year edition is $4, so I'm like, and I wanted to play it. So I said, sure, I'll buy that. And while I'm at it, I might as well buy some other things too. So I bought Stanley Parable, which I've been meaning to play. I bought Shadows of Mordor, like I mentioned. I bought all 3 Jackbox games. I bought the Jedi Knights collection, so that's Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight sequels. I forget all their names.
I bought
Yeah.
Academy,
I bought Half Minute Hero 2, which is the sequel to Half Minute Hero.
No kidding.
I bought Nom Nom Galaxy. If you're not aware, that is a pixel junk game.
Oh.
So they made pixel junk shooters, pixel junk monsters. I've also bought The Vanishing of Ethan Carter because I heard it was good. I watched actually Vice play that for a little bit.
Oh, I didn't know Vice would play that.
At his house, and it looked kind of cool. Like it's kind of like Stanley Parable, where it's very much just walking around and exploring the story, but it's just a little creepy, which is nice, but it's not supposed to be a horror game.
It's not horror, but it's definitely not funny.
Yeah.
I'd like
Unlike Stanley Parable,
yeah.
which...
I'd like to thank you for the reminder on that one, because one thing I've noticed about the Steam sale is there's so much stuff on Steam now that it's actually really hard to pick out what you want to buy if you're not just going to buy everything on sale, right? Like, you can spend a lot of time browsing the Steam sale, like the indexes, and just miss 75% of the stuff that you might be interested in.
Throughout I guess my years on Steam, I just keep throwing things into my wish list,
right?
And then every now and then call it with games that I realize I'm never actually going to play. And then whenever Steam sale comes around, depending on the prices, I usually don't get anything because they're only half off, which sounds silly that I'm not going to get it even though it's half off, but it's still like $20 half off, and I don't want it enough to pay that much. I would pay it if I had nothing else to play, but I usually have so many other things to play that I'm not going to spend another $20.
And it adds
up.
By
the way, I'm
fast.
curious. You said you got the Jedi Knight collection. Have you played either Dark Forces game?
I played both Dark Forces, and I started playing the second Jedi Knight game, which is Jedi Academy. I kind of wanted to play it again because it was on my wish list, and I wanted to play it again just because it's Dark Forces.
You know, I just wanted to give a serious shout out to Dark Forces 2 because that game is still,
it was really
the game
good.
is still good. Like, first-person lightsaber combat should be just the worst, but it's actually not bad.
And I think that collection was only $7 to $10, so I thought it was a pretty good steal.
That's great.
Yep.
What did the other two of you buy?
You can play it just in time for it to be rendered non-canonical by the new Disney.
Yes. I don't care. Kyle Katarn is still my favorite.
Yeah, indeed. I had a roommate back in college who was a huge fan of some of the old Jedi Academy games. He played it online a lot, so I got to watch it quite often, and I have a lot of fond memories about the game. I know that on my side I purchased what was it? I bought the Vanishing of Ethan Carter literally right before this podcast because I saw it in your show notes and it reminded me, I really want to play that. It wasn't on my wish list. So to Steam, the only other thing I bought was let me take a Hollow Knight, which one of our viewers had recommended previously, and the other thing I purchased was I don't remember. Maybe it'll come to me during my segment.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
It's a real nail biter.
Yeah. At least so far, I've only purchased one game. It was Pony Island with the soundtrack. It was like $1.97. Pony Island is one of those games. You're really better off not explaining it and just letting you play it and see that, like, don't let the title fool you is all I'll say, because there is nothing joyful.
It sounds familiar, but I've never actually played it.
I gotta show you at some point. It's freaking great.
If you watch the trailer, it's pretty obvious that it's not actually a game about ponies.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know there was a trailer at first. I guess on Steam everything has a trailer, but I only heard there's a game called Pony Island, and then I saw Vice just outright play it. I'm like, whoa, this is not what I thought it would be. But I mean, I'd heard that it was dark, and I'm like, okay, is it a dark game with ponies on an island? Nope.
Right. Oh, the other game was the Talos Principle, which I purchased. Because I know Lotus Prince is a big fan of that game.
And so is Luminaire.
Yeah, Luminaire is the one who introduced it to me.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw him playing it, and I've already described this, at least in my Let's Play. I don't remember if I described it elsewhere, but it's basically Portal. Like, the game plays like Portal, except you're not using portals. You're trying to, redirect lasers or use other tools. It's a game where you solve puzzles to move to the next area and get the bigger story in pieces as you go. So that's how it's like Portal. There's just no actual portals.
So they should have called it Laser.
Yeah, it should have been called Laser and Cube. Or no, they call it like hexahedron, I think.
Well, they could have called Portal Cube, right?
Yeah,
just because that was the part of the game that most people seem to remember the best.
Yeah, and Cake, and the lack thereof.
And Cake. Yep.
So other than our purchases, like the reason why I bought stuff, like I said, Shadows of Mordor, and then I had a party yesterday, and that's why I bought the Jackbox collection. I figured now's the time. It's during the Steam sale, and I have a party, and I've been wanting to get all of them. But the other thing is it got me wanting to get my Steam Link working, because originally our router was on the first floor, and my computer is 2 floors above it, so the streaming wasn't that great. So now that we've moved the router to the second floor, I wanted to try getting the Steam Link to work again. And so there was like a bunch of other games I played now that I tested it out. There's I played Portal 2 for a little bit just to remember how funny it was. I played Shadows of Mordor. I played there's this shooter I played. I forget what it's called, so it doesn't really help us right now. Maybe it'll come to me later.
Description at all?
I don't. Normal shooter. I mean, I can't really say much about it. It's very, very generic in no sense, but I know I played it at MagFest 2 years ago, I believe.
Was it a first-person shooter, a top-down shooter, a third-person shooter?
Oh, like a shoot-'em-up. So you have a ship that's shooting lasers.
Okay.
What else?
Vice would know.
Yeah, Vice would probably know. But yeah, so those are the games that I played when I was testing out, and it works a lot better, but I realized I had to lower the streaming quality. So it used to be on like beautiful, which it looks really good, but it might be a little slow. I had to turn it down to fast, so it doesn't look as nice, but it streams a lot better.
Okay.
And it's because I just like playing games on the first floor instead of in the attic where I'm all by myself. So I want to get that working when I'm playing games down there. And the other thing I've been doing this week, other than all that, is just playing the games that I've been playing, the Final Fantasy XIV and the World of Final Fantasy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, other
So
than the big purchases and the getting the Steam Link working, it's just been Final Fantasy.
Right,
and I've started putting together my girlfriend's computer, which is another big thing.
Nice. So how was World of Final Fantasy? I remember you had only just given us your first impressions during last week's podcast. Do you have anything else to say about that?
I guess really all I have to say is it's very cutesy. And it's obvious, but I just want to say that all it has going for it. I don't want to say all, but most of what it has going for it is how cute it is and how nostalgic it is.
Does it have all of our favorite characters, like Moogle?
More or less. Like who?
Like
Moogle?
Moogle?
Oh, Chocobo.
Yes, it does have Moogle and Chocobo.
Chocobo is my favorite character.
Chocobo.
Chocobo.
I love Final Fantasy.
But I will say, like, the gameplay is cool. Like, I really like the stacking and the whole collectathon, whatever Pokemon-ish thing going. But the battles aren't very thrilling. Mm-hmm. Most bosses just evolve into mashing attack and healing when I'm about to die. There's nothing special to most of them.
Sounds like a classic JRPG. Do you feel how deep do you think you're going to get into this game? Because I know you often platinum games. Do you see yourself going past the end of the storyline in this one?
That's a good question. I think after I beat it, it'll really just depend on... Because I haven't looked at the trophies yet. Mm-hmm. So it'll really depend on how difficult the trophies are after I beat it. If all the trophies are, let's say, collecting all of them, buying all the medals so you can summon all your favorite heroes, completing all the missions, I'll probably do that because that's quick stuff I can do on the train. But if there's like really, really obnoxious trophies to do, then I probably won't. And also it depends on, like, there's really no other Vita game that I want to play. Or DS now that I think about it. If there's another DS game or Vita game that comes out or that I think about, and the trophies are even just a little bit annoying, I'll probably just drop it and start something new.
Yeah, I often find myself getting into that position when I feel like I'm definitely going to try play a game 100%. That usually I hit like a day when there's something I want to do other than play that game, and I'll like give it my best until I feel like falling asleep that day or just getting rid of the game, just like chuck it. It's like I'll never see it again for years.
Yeah, well, that's my week.
All right.
So, Lotus, why don't you take it away?
Let's do it. Okay, so for starters, I could talk about Skies of Arcadia a little bit. I am just about done. I've done almost everything in the game that there is to do. The only things I'm missing are a couple of rare creature drops that if I really want to, I could just go around to the areas where I get into random encounters and fight the creatures until I get some stupid percentage, like 2 or 3% drop, and get the item I want. I don't know if I feel like doing that. I've done a lot of that stuff, actually. And anywhere that's like a one-time area, I've gotten the rare drops, at least that I can't get anywhere else in those places. A couple nights ago, I straight up spent like hours looking for one drop, and it made me so mad, but I got it.
Yeah. But I mean, are these like unique items that you can't get anywhere else, or is it like incidental that you're trying to get them just to show off that like complete a compendium for yourself?
No, they're unique items. I mean, there are some rare drops that I could buy in a store, but hey, this creature drops it too. But like the ones I'm really going for are only accessible as far as I'm aware from these particular creatures. I'm kind of losing interest at the very end because it's just like accessories that I won't wear anyway for the most part and things like that. But it's just kind of cool to have. That said, though, I did do the GameCube version's super secrets for getting the Vice the Legend wanted poster rank, which is kind of hard to do. Like, you pretty much need a guide for it because a lot of the stuff you'll do naturally, like kill 2,500 enemies, or get into this many non-story ship battles, like just because you feel like trying it out, you might do that. But there's also just real quick, there's also make such and such many decisions when you're given a choice of what to say, don't screw it up, and like find 90% of the chests in the game. There aren't too many missable chests, but some chests are kind of difficult to find, so like that takes a little more doing, I think. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, OldManStompy?
I was going to ask if you ever got the Sword of Kings in Earthbound, and I was also going to ask if you think that... So I remember when I played the game...
I did with the speed-up function on my emulator. That took forever to get back.
Nice. So that's what that reminded me of, but it also... I know when I played the game, 2,500 battles seemed like I would have to do a lot of fighting on top of what was required to level up enough to beat the game.
All you have to do is just not run away.
Well, no, I mean, do you feel like doing all this grinding for rare drops helped you get to 2,500? Because I was not close to 2,500 when I beat the game.
You know what? There's a... I don't know, but there's a guy on a secret island that was like DLC in the Dreamcast version. The GameCube version just comes with it. But if you talk to him, he could just give you your stats. So if he tells me how many enemies I've killed, and it's like barely above 2,500, then the answer is yes. But, I mean, I will say, though, one of the ways you get your super ranking is by recruiting every crew member. And one crew member will only join you if you have at least such and such a ranking by the time you meet him. And to get that ranking, you should not be running away from battles, because eventually that can lower your ranking. So, not running away from battles, it's kind of tempting just because it's like, ah, damn it, I'm not in the mood. But not running away from battles in general really does help. Not to mention that not only do you gain regular XP, but you gain magic XP, so you can level up like what spells you get and things like that. So just suck it up and fight, really. It just makes life a lot easier. Sure. And the 3 secrets, by the way, one of them is okay. The other 2 are great. So we'll be seeing that. At this point, I think the next installment I record is going to be the last, because I've actually gone through the final dungeon already. But one thing that's a pain in the ass is that part of the way you get the super ranking is by beating every bounty in the game and then collecting your reward. And one of the bounties is in a chest well into the final dungeon, so I basically had to go almost to the final boss and then back all the way out. So I've pretty much shown the whole dungeon. So the next installment is just going to be me making my way back through the dungeon. I may or may not even show that part. And it's just like, here's the final boss. Let's fight the final boss and then beat the game. So Skies of Arcadia is going to be 52 installments. So I don't know if that's going to be longer in raw time than Danganronpa, but installment count, yes, it is. There's a chance it might be Danganronpa on both counts anyway, because a lot of installments are pushing an RPG. It is. Like a lot of installments kind of like push an hour, so like it might actually beat Danganronpa. The only thing that makes me question it is some of those trials really just kept going.
And Danganronpa V3 comes out in September. I don't know if you knew that.
I had forgotten that. I remember because like the thing is, I had pre-ordered the special edition of the package, and like I did I grouped things in one order, so I still don't have Danganronpa 1 and 2 because they're going to ship them all at the same time. So but
generally that must be like a really nice feeling when there's a game you really want and you just have no idea when it's coming out. Because you forgot
today's the day.
So long ago. It was like, shows up at your door like, holy cow, Danganronpa V3.
Yeah,
you're only like 2.5 games behind being able to play it, including a television series.
Oh no! the only thing that doesn't usually happen to me with games, but it does happen on like Kickstarter items or when I pre-order like well in advance something on Amazon or whatever, and all of a sudden it shows up, and then I get the email, leave feedback, and then I go to Amazon, and it's like, it's too late to leave feedback. I'm like, well, thanks.
Yeah, I just got a email today or yesterday about a game that I kickstarted 7 years ago saying, hey guys, we're finally done. And I'm like, I completely forgot about you.
Which game was that?
Jetpack 2. I don't know if anyone knows about it. It used to be this really old game that I played.
Wait, on the
where you're a guy to the jetpack. It's like a 2D 2D platformer kind of.
You're collecting your ship pieces?
No, you have a jetpack and you're just collecting crystals. Like it's nothing special. It was nostalgia, and I'm like, sure, I'll back this. Why not?
Okay, because I
remember that was one of the games that made me decide not to back games anymore.
Because I remember
the one that really killed me was Cryamore, which I believe you, Pyro, recommended to me a long time ago, maybe 7 years ago, and that's been.
Yep.
I know they got some funding from Atlas, so like there must.
Oh, they did? I did not know that.
There must have been some promise of the game, but apparently that's like already run out, and now they're just back to doing it in their basement or whatever. So
oh wow!
Who knows how long that could take?
No, the only thing I was going to say about Jetpack is that maybe this is a different game after all, but there's a different game called Jetpack that was on the ZX Spectrum, which I hadn't heard of at the time I played the game, because Did you guys play Donkey Kong 64?
Yeah, it's a rare game. It's one of the bonus games you have to play to get 101% on Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah, so I was like, I played Jetpack. Like, it's just so I don't know. It's just like that's the game. They're making a sequel to that.
have you played the original Advice's Place or something? Because I know he has a Spectrum.
No, I played it via DK64. But just Vice told me that it was on the Spectrum, and I'm like, oh, okay.
So I've been told that apparently there's a full ZX Spectrum emulator on like GoldenEye 007, which I guess was
I heard
like
something about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the prototype to what would eventually become the Spectrum games that showed up on Donkey Kong 64, since they're both.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because DK64, like I don't know about now, but at least at the time, DK64 was the only way to get perfect ports of Jetpack and Donkey Kong, the arcade game, because the Nintendo game was damn good, but it was missing that conveyor belt level with the pies. So like DK64's port was the only complete one, just like how like the best way to play Space Harrier is like through Shenmue. It's like, okay, why not? Yeah, and like, you know, now Yakuza 5 has Virtua Fighter 2 in its arcade, and it's like, why not?
How is the Outrun version on Yakuza? Because I know that's also something that shows up randomly in one of the older Yakuza games.
I don't think I tried that, actually, so I can't comment, unfortunately. Now I gotta look into that, I guess. But other than Skies of Arcadia, just a few more quick things to go over. One is that Skies of Arcadia is going to be my 100th Let's Play. So
oh, nice.
Yeah, so at this point, I forgot when I started making an opening for my Let's Play series, like an opening theme, but I did it, you know, a while back, and it was pretty cool, but the music I was using was kind of licensed. I had chopped up like the parts of like the Duke Nukem 3D theme. Like it worked for my thing, but it's like I was getting copyright flagged every time I would do the first episode or something. So I'm like, maybe I better change it up. So like for my, I think it was for my 50th Let's Play, or 49th or something, I did a new opening, which is the one I've been using like ever since. And I made a new opening for the 100th. So like the 50th Let's Plays opening and onward covered like the last 25 games I played. This new opening, despite being about the same length, has clips from, you know, the past like 50 games, including Skies of Arcadia, and I feel that it came out pretty well. So like, I'm just curious as to how people are going to respond to it, because I remember with my second opening, people were like, "Oh, this tonal shift is pretty drastic," and it was. But you know, you get used to it, and it is a pretty sweet theme. The new song I'm using was made by the same guy, actually. You know, our friend Woody, and I'm using a different song from him that he had sent over, and I had chopped that up to make it make sense with the clip that I'd used. And I think it came out pretty well, so I look forward to showcasing that. Otherwise, otherwise, I think I mentioned a while back I had done Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on Knuckles live stream, and I didn't quite beat the game. I got a game over on Death Egg Zone, and that play sucks to get a game over on, because Sonic 3 has level select, but once you've beaten the game, until then you can only continue on the last level you were on, and that means you can't grind for lives. So however many lives you had on Death Egg Zone, if you die, you're back with 3, and it's a pretty rough 2 levels. And the final boss of Death Egg Zone Act 2 is, it's a 3-part boss. Like, you fight the regular Robotnik fight, and it's kind of a nuisance. It's a callback to Wing Fortress Zone from Sonic 2. Then you fight Phase 1 of the giant robot, then Phase 2 of the giant robot, and then Robotnik tries flying away, and you have to chase him and hit him 8 times, so I guess that's sort of a 4th phase. And the thing with that is the platforms are falling away behind you, so when you hit Robotnik, the momentum pushes you back a little bit. It's kind of easy to just get killed, even though he's not attacking you. But I finally got through that, and then I just did a showcase of... Well, first of all, I got all the emeralds and the hyper emeralds after I had done that. And then I just showcased the... what Super Tails, whatever he's called, Super Knuckles or Hyper Knuckles, and Hypersonic looked like, and then I showed off Hyper Knuckles' super for real final boss, and Sonic's super for real final boss in Doomsday Zone. Like, Sonic 2 I think is my favorite game of the trilogy to play, but Sonic 3 I think is the best game in terms of just scope and just how grand everything is. It's like the most satisfying ending by far, even though Sonic 2 is way more faithful to the gotta go fast mentality. Sonic 3 is a lot of like slowing down and exploring and being hesitant for traps and things like that, and the levels are fun, but they're not hold right and watch how fast you go, with few exceptions.
So you did figure out which of the two directions to go in,
I
right?
did. Well, the thing with Sonic 3 is sometimes you do go left, so it's weird. Like Sonic 1, very rarely do you go left. Sonic 2, again, very rarely. But Sonic 3, it gets kind of like maze-like at some points. The last thing I'll say is that I just stopped off at TooManyGames today. Today meaning Sunday.
How is it?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I remember the first time I ever took you there, it was kind of just getting started. It was like an up-and-coming con, so it didn't really have a lot to offer in the ways of traditional cons. Like I remember...
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because I remember... Sorry to interrupt, just quick. But I remember the first time I went, I thought it was kind of bland.
Yeah, well, no, I remember the arcade area was like 2 CRT TVs or something, and it's like, oh, like now they actually have a dedicated arcade area. Like,
okay, yeah, and then I remember like 2 years ago when I went the second time, they had a board game area, so I noticed they were adding things to it.
Yeah, I believe.
But I'm curious if they've actually improved a lot, or if it's
I would
still...
say yes. The dealer's room is largely the same, but that's because the whole con kind of is a dealer's room, so like that should stay the same. But here's a question: I forgot about this. Did you go to another video game con with us in Parsippany? Okay, because I was all right. Because I was gonna say the arcade at TooManyGames is kind of like that. It's not like MagFest where there's this giant ass room. There's a pretty large space dedicated though, and they do have a bunch of games. It's like it really is a pretty sweet sized arcade. They've definitely stepped up since you were last there.
Okay.
And I only picked up a couple things. One, I picked up the latest Hardcore Gaming 101 book from Kurt Collada. He goes to these cons and he sells his stuff, and those books are super freaking cool. So I picked up the latest one. And the other thing I got was a copy of Rival Schools for the PS1. That is a thing where, number one, I almost never see it in the wild. That's just rare.
Yeah, I've heard of that a lot when I was younger.
Yeah,
but I've never played it. Is it just a normal fighting game?
It's pretty normal, but like it's the characters have a lot of like pizzazz to them. It's been a long time since I played it, so I can't go into too much detail, unfortunately. Although I will say, I forgot what game Sakura is actually from. Maybe it's Street Fighter Alpha, but she's in Rival Schools. Like
I think it's Alpha. Yeah,
it is Alpha. Okay, well,
where's MrRyu when you need him?
I know. No, Sakura's in Rival Schools, and she also has a friend who looks kind of like her called Hinata. And that was one thing I've always wondered. Like, we never heard from Hinata again. It's like, oh, okay, I guess Sakura's the one who matters. All right, fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but I know that there were a couple of characters from Rival Schools in like Capcom versus SNK, which had a huge roster.
Yes,
but like only
exactly
maybe one or two.
One Kyosuke.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention that next. Yeah, Kyosuke. He's kind of cool. I don't know why they focused on him of all people though. Like Batsu, I would imagine, is kind of like the Ryu of that game. I don't even remember if it's in playstyle, but he's kind of the main character, I think. But
well, there can only be so many Ryus in like a single fighting game, right?
That is true.
Actual Ryu.
Although I will say Kyosuke has like a super in Capcom vs SNK 2 where I think a bunch of other people from Rival Schools like show up and like team up with him or something, but they're not playable. It's kind of like Yun and Yang. You can only play as Yun, but Yang shows up really briefly. And it's like, who's that guy? Like, and I actually didn't know at the time because I hadn't played Street Fighter 3. But the thing with Rival Schools, this was kind of interesting. I never see it just lying around, so I was like, oh damn, Rival Schools. Normally it's like an $80 game. Like I checked on eBay, it ranges from like 75 to like 90-ish. But this game didn't have the insert. Like the part that has like the back of the box. It was the case, the 2 CDs, and the instruction manual. And because it did not have the insert, it was freaking like $30 off, like $50. Like normally,
oh wow,
yeah, like normally I want a game complete, but like, dude, I don't like $30 for the insert. Like I'll suck it up. Like I'll take a dramatic discount for something that
you can buy some you can go to like Kinko's and print an insert and just stick it in yourself if you really
if I really want to.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, actually, come to think of it, I should do that for Snatcher because Snatcher doesn't have its insert, but like I got a copy with the manual and that got me severely discounted as well. But yeah, I should probably do that. But yeah, that's been my week. So how about you, OldManStompy, the host?
Nice. I'm glad to wind down our silver anniversary.
Yeah.
By starting with wrestling, of course. That's my my calling card, right? So I remember a few months ago I was talking about Wrestle Kingdom 11, the Japanese version of WrestleMania, and about the main event between Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega, the Street Fighter guy. It got the first ever 6-star rating from wrestling's premier wrestling journalist and critic.
Right? I was going to address that. I remember you had mentioned that, and I forgot what you had said was the one thing ever that was 6 stars. So just this past week I googled it. I was like, what was the 6-star thing? Wrestle Kingdom 11? Okay. And of course I can't watch the whole thing on YouTube. But I saw a music video highlight reel. Those moves were freaking crazy, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, part of what was so exceptional was that match went for about 40 minutes, maybe 37, I want to say. God. And, their moves were still incredibly crisp at the end, which is hard to do if you think about how, physically draining a wrestling match is.
Yeah, Kenny Omega's jumping up and, grabbing the guy's neck with his legs and flipping over backwards. It's it looks like a move in a fighting game that people can't do in real life, and he's doing it in real life repeatedly.
That's his finishing move, and it's hard. And actually, so the follow-up to the story, and the reason why I'm bringing it up now, is that I had another match about 2 weeks ago, and it was a 60-minute time limit draw.
Oh my god.
Which rarely happens in WWF programming. It used to be part of American professional wrestling. They would announce a time limit, and it would go to a draw if you ran out of time. But with the advent of the roster on WWF is so big, and with the advent of broadcast television, they don't really bother doing the time limit anymore. They just go from match to match to match. And really, the Japanese are the biggest major promotion or series of promotions that still use the time limit as a factor in matches. So Omega and Okada, they went to a 60-minute time limit draw, partially because New Japan Pro Wrestling is trying to get into the American market, and they're really trying to push Kenny Omega as a big American star who has an appeal to the American fans that they're going to try to market to. So they had this 60-minute time limit draw, and Meltzer, the journalist, said that it was even better than the first one, and he gave it 6 1/4.
What the hell?
So there's two jokes, two memes that have come out of this. One is that Kenny Omega has not actually had a regular 5-star match. so the joke is that, oh, what a bum, he's never had a 5-star match, he's only had a 6.
That's
and
great.
A 6 1/4. And also that Okada and Omega, their average match scores are over 5 stars right now for the year.
That is
just
ludicrous.
Because of these two matches.
They should never wrestle again. It's like Space Jam. I've had 1 win, 0 draws, 0 losses. I retire.
The idea is they're building towards a climax, right? They're not going to rest on their laurels. The idea is they keep having these matches that are better and better and better. So, what could they possibly pull out to, conclude the series? And I guess we'll find out soon. So when WWF is sort of careening towards WrestleMania, they have what's called the Royal Rumble, which we talked about back in January when it happened, where they have 30 guys get in the ring, and whoever's the last man standing gets a challenge for the title of his choice at WrestleMania. Of course, since we're talking about how much better New Japan Pro Wrestling is for wrestling purists, they have a much cooler variant of that called the G1 Climax, which they just announced the competitors for earlier this week. So what they do is they have 2 pools of 10 guys, and they wrestle round robin for about 3 weeks. And the winner of both blocks wrestle each other for that title shot, same as the Royal Rumble. You get a challenge for the title of your choice. And if the current champion is the guy who wins the G1 Climax, then he gets to call out the person of his choice, and that becomes the main event of Wrestle Kingdom in January. So what that means is you have 20 of the best guys in pro wrestling all fighting against each other, and you have all these storylines that develop as the matches proceed over the course of these 3 weeks, and it is probably, in terms of pure technical wrestling, the best 3 weeks in professional wrestling. And of course they're marketing it towards trying to penetrate into the U.S. market. So they're having 2 pre-shows in Los Angeles, including, I think, another match. They're having a match between Okada and Cody Rhodes, who is a former WWF wrestler and the son of a WWF legend who went to New Japan very recently, and he's experienced a bit of a career revitalization. So they're giving him a title match, again, to sort of appeal to American viewers. And most likely, since every talented, top of the card NJPW guys is in the tournament, right? There's no way of knowing. There's no easy way to predict who's likely to be competing for the title in January. So it's very exciting. There's usually at least 3 or 4 competitors for match of the year. 3 or 4 like possible 5-star matches. So I encourage our listeners who are interested in any way in wrestling, especially the Japanese style of wrestling, to go on to New Japan World and pick up a subscription, because it will be very exciting. Now is a great time to be a wrestling fan.
Of course, speaking of which, going to New Japan World, just for clarity, this is spelled NU Japan?
NEW Japan
It actually
World.
is the word. Okay.
And well, I mean, the website is NJP World.
Okay.
Or NJPW World. Anyway, I'll send you the link. Don't just go typing in combinations of things into the your location bar in your browser. That will lead you to all kinds of trouble, as you know.
Yes.
Anyway, besides that, so you remember, Lotus, last year I did a Record Keeper Let's Play for like 2 episodes, right?
Yeah, and because you had super an overpowered team, so you're like, let's just look at like a super high level dungeon and just beat the crap out of it.
Yeah, so that was the New Year's Day event in Japan. And the joke is that the game is actually 6 months ahead in Japan of what we get in North America, meaning that we get the New Year's event with different like trappings in July. So they do a countdown, but it counts down to the 1st of July, which is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But the gimmick was that you fought Gilgamesh, and he has an attack called Dawn Spring, which last year did exactly 2016 damage to all your characters. And that was like the boss you had to overcome. So I had forgotten about that, and this year, like, there was just some random event, because there's a festival where they have a bunch of event dungeons every 3 months. And I was just like grinding through all the stuff that they put in front of me, and I run into Gilgamesh again. I was like, oh, Gilgamesh, he shows up all the time in this game. He's really popular in Japan, so he's in a lot of like events. And so I'm fighting, and all of a sudden he goes, Dawn Spring, 2017 damage. I was like, this is the...
Yep. The longer you wait to play this game, the harder it gets.
Yeah, in 1,000 years, this game is going to be really hard. That's what I've been up to. It's my mobile game of choice. It is, of course, the Happy New July event. So that's that. Otherwise, I've been playing Stormblood, like Pyro. We went dungeon crawling with MrRyu a couple days ago, and that is always a lot of fun. On my last recollection, he kited a bunch of monsters, because he's a tank, into my wife, and she died. And that was really nice.
What an excellent troll. I was still laughing out loud at the teleports behind you, nothing personal, kid. Just like kills a player. Yes. That is the funniest thing.
So, Stormblood has glamour, where you can like you can change your appearance to whatever you like, including other races in the game. And a lot of the time he spends his time like just completely naked except for a loincloth, with the gentleman title, running around doing dances until someone pays attention to him. So that's a lot of fun. Otherwise, the last thing I have is Kamen Rider, because I am really, really trying to get to the end of the first series. I will say that I've lost a lot of momentum, just because the first series is 98 episodes long, which is twice the length of a normal Kamen Rider series.
And even the normal Kamen Rider series is 50 some odd, and those are long.
Yeah.
So I've reached past the halfway point. We've said goodbye to Dr. Shinigami. Of course, they had a final battle where he shows up with the scythe, because of course he's a Reaper, so of course he's gonna have the scythe. You wouldn't think that he would be able to like physically put up any real fight against the Kamen Rider Cyborg, because he's like an old guy in a wheelchair. But I guess like Whitebeard in One Piece, like old people in anime and Japanese like media have just as much strength, just less stamina.
The strongest of all.
Mm-hmm. So, the new villain is called Ambassador Hell, which is another great name for a character. And he's got this, like, I guess it's supposed to be Egyptian-themed costume, and he's got this, like, this giant mask that covers, like, most of his face, and it gives this weird effect, like, it makes his head, even though you can, like, clearly see it's still his head inside a giant mask, it makes his head look huge, even if you just try to focus on the actual, like, human part of his face.
Nice.
So I thought that was a pretty impressive special effect. And I'll be interested to see. So Dr. Shinigami didn't actually die in his final appearance. I will say that Hayato Ichimonji, the second rider, he left. He switched places with Takeshi Hongo. So Kamen Rider number 1 is back to being the main star of the series. I guess that's part of how they flip back and forth during the 13 episode season cycles. And I guess I'm happy about that, because I liked him a little bit better. And he appeared briefly during the previous season, but the gimmick was that he was coming over from, like, Europe. And so he would come and he would, like, save Ichimonji from whatever the monster of the week was. And then Ichimonji would go, like, don't you want to go back and say hi to your friends? And he's like, no, I must go back to Europe right now. And then he would leave.
It's so good.
It's like Europe and Japan are like completely the opposite sides of the country. How do you have this much time to fly like on a 1970s aircraft technology all the way back to Japan, and then all the way back to Europe that tightly that you can't even stop by your racing club to say hi to your friends? Like, he really has a flight to catch.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, so that was my week, generally speaking. Otherwise, I'd be happy to hear that gives us plenty of time, actually, to take questions from viewers. So, Lotus, why don't you take it away?
Well, are we going to do Vice's way in? Does one of us want to do our own way in? No?
More like way out until next week.
Whoa, way out there! Okay, so, yeah, we're actually down to our last 2 questions, by the way. So, if any listener does have any questions they wish to ask, please let us know. We'd be happy to answer them on a future podcast. In this case, probably the next one.
Like I always say, don't limit them to being about games. Mm-hmm. No matter how much we love talking about games and love talking about ourselves, just whatever comes to your mind, ask it.
Actually,
I will.
Speaking of which, this covers not video games. Insane Buffoon asks, when you feel the urge to go back and rewatch a series, do you watch it in its chronological order, according to series canon, or in order of its release date? For example, if you wanted to watch the Star Wars movies all over again, would you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3? That kind of thing?
That's actually a really good question, because I was thinking more about TV shows, but
I guess
I'll give the example I was thinking of, because TV shows usually
I watch Memento by rewinding it. Yeah.
But the one show that I'm thinking of is Firefly. I don't know if either of you have watched it. You've probably heard of it.
Yeah. Yep.
But when they aired that show, it was all over the place in terms of episode number. Mm-hmm. Like, this is just an example, but it was like episode 12, then episode 1, then episode 9, then episode 7. It was really weird.
That sucks.
And it wasn't like they did that necessarily for any particular reason, as far as I know. But I didn't watch it when it was aired, so when I downloaded all the episodes, by some means, I watched it in actual episode number, and I thought that it went well. But in your terms of Star Wars, let's say, I do watch that in chronological order.
Well, yeah, chronological order according to the canon, or in order of its release date?
Canon, sorry.
Okay, so you would do 1 through 6?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's actually a separate consideration to what the question originally said, right? Because the production order and the chronological order within the series canon aren't always the same too, on top of the air date, right? Those are 3 separate timelines.
That's true.
Like there are some series like Futurama that don't really have a canon, but do have like a production order and an airing order that are like totally uncorrelated with one another. And sometimes that matters, right? Because sometimes, like for example, Futurama is a comedy. It has a plot, but it's not that important to understanding the series. But sometimes there are running jokes that you wouldn't get unless you saw their genesis based on the production order of the series and how the writers inserted it into the plot line. So it really depends on the show.
Yeah, in my case, I would watch in the order it was released for the reason you just said. Like, if I, like, there have been, like, game series, for example, where, people go like, oh, just go ahead and start with this one. You don't really need to play the first 2. And even if that's true from a plot standpoint, there tends to be, like, minor references that may not even matter, but I just like being able to pick up on little things like that. Like, there are nods to, like, hey, you remember the previous game or the previous series or the previous movie or the previous episode or whatever. Like for example, Star Wars, they, like, for, like, the Star Wars movies, I guess once you've seen them, any twists have already hit, right? So I guess it wouldn't matter too much if you saw them in order, but still, personally, I would watch 4 through 6 and then 1 through 3, just because 1 through 3 are so overt about the big twist in episode 5 that, like, when I finally get the 5, it'll be like, yeah, I know, instead of, like, the reveal it would have been supposed to be, I guess. I like, again, once you know, I guess it really doesn't matter, but that's just kind of how I am.
Yeah. So, another thing that I would... Oh, sorry, you go.
No, continue.
Another thing that I was thinking of in terms of, let's say, playing games, if I was going to play them in order, if I wasn't gonna, like, let's say, skip to Metal Gear Solid 3, let's say, because that, whether people think it's good or not, I'm just using it as an example. If I was ever planning on playing 1 and 2, I'd probably want to play them first too, because they would feel older. And
That's
once
a good
you've
point.
played 3 and you see all the new stuff, when you go back to 1 and 2, it might feel more archaic, which is actually the same reason why I'd watch Star Wars Episode 1 through 6 in that order, because 1 through 3 feels archaic compared to 4 through 6.
Oh, that's ironic.
On the other hand,
that is a good point.
Yeah. On the other hand, like Rogue One, right? That kind of implies that you know a lot about the series, even though it takes place between Episode 3 and Episode 4. So you wouldn't really want to watch it like chronologically where it's supposed to be.
Well, yeah, I mean that's how I feel about the prequels, where it's like, hey, remember that famous twist from like 1980? Well,
right.
We know that you know, so here you go. You know, like that kind of thing. But like, and yeah, that is a good point about games though. Like Metal Gear Solid 3 in particular, at least Subsistence, all of a sudden you can control the camera with the right control stick, whereas Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 were fixed control camera angles. And like if you play 3 because it happened as a prequel, and then you go to 1 or 2, it's like, whoa, like all of a sudden I don't have control. And it just feels a little off. Like Metal Gear Solid 2 is probably my favorite of the original trilogy, but to play like 3 just because it plays better.
So this actually kind of leads me to believe this is the reason why, for example, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is a prequel, right? Because people who weren't aware of the series originally, like that game's going to come out with a lot of hype. We were all very excited about it when we talked about it last week during the E3 show, and we were all very surprised to see it in playable form. But that's us, and we've like played the original game before. What's actually most likely to happen for like large scale game fans is that they're going to play the prequel first. They're not going to have any prior knowledge as to what the story is going to be like, and then maybe later, if they're sufficiently compelled, then they'll go find the original game, you know, and they'll try to play it and see what all the hype was about. That this game was so, came from out of the blue. Like it was so warmly received by fans of the original, or not warmly received, but the announcement was warmly received.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, you know, I wasn't here for the E3 episode, but one thing that did bug me about the Beyond Good and Evil thing, well, there were a couple. One was that there was zero gameplay. Like, we've had an E3 several years ago where there was gameplay. I guess they scrapped that because that was a Jade.
There was a demo.
That's what it was, because that was a Jade and Page game. The new one is a prequel. What kind of bugs me about it being a prequel, because it is cool to be like, what was the previous Beyond Good and Evil like? And then you can see how the story progresses. That is pretty cool. But what bugs me about it being a prequel is that Beyond Good and Evil, without spoilers, like, clearly sets up for something to happen later. And we've been waiting 15 years, and we finally get an announcement, and it's a prequel. It's like it's like Metal Gear Solid 2. Like, we didn't have to wait nearly that long, but Metal Gear Solid 2 ended with like, what? You can't be serious. What do you mean? And then it's a prequel. Like, god damn it.
So I never take that for granted, because I can think of at least one instance in like gaming history where a game phrased itself. I don't want to mention the game because it'll spoil it, but it was a game that I didn't expect to get a sequel. Did get a sequel. It was announced to be a prequel, and then it turned out that the plot twist about halfway through the game was that it actually was a sequel, and it only felt like a prequel because the characters from the first game secretly travel back in time.
That is nuts.
The young versions of themselves were actually them from the future pretending to be young versions of themselves.
That is crazy.
And like enacting a plan, and that really came out of nowhere. So since Beyond Good and Evil does have a pretty deep story to it and a lot of lore, like, I will never take anything for granted about what people say about like what a game is going to be. Like, we could learn a lot about the world.
Sure.
This prequel, and I'm.
I do look forward to that. I just want to see what happens with Jade and Page. But no, that is super awesome though. And by the way, one thing before we get to the next question, I also remember that one of the questions last week was like your like favorite use of licensed music in a form of media. Just quick shout out to that, because I was pretty passionate about that question. I really got a kick out of the final countdown in Arrested Development whenever Joe Bluth would do his act, the magician's act. Lollipop Chainsaw had licensed music everywhere, and it felt appropriate, especially Pac-Man Fever in the arcade level. But the last thing, like, this is the same logic Vice had for Guardians of the Galaxy with its, you know, rad 80s music. It was like, oh, cool nostalgia, but it actually really contributed to the story at the same time. And it was functional music, I gotta go with the opening montage in Watchmen with Bob Dylan's "The Times They Are Changin'." Like, even the people who don't care for that movie were like, that opening montage was freaking great. Okay, the last question we have for tonight, which is actually our last podcast question. Like, again, if you have questions, please do submit them. We would greatly appreciate them. It gives us cool conversation pieces. This is from Fakafon. Have you ever encountered a banal mechanic or situation in a video game that was made to be better? For example, a lot of video games involve climbing ladders, and that can be boring. But in God Hand, fuck it. You're at the bottom of a ladder, you go up to the ladder, press the action button, ha! Like, suddenly you jump to the top. Like, you just jump to the top. There is no climbing. Or, like, even in Dark Souls, not the first game, but I think the later ones, and definitely Bloodborne, you can speed up your climbing up, and you could slide down, so that makes it better. Things like that. Or like Metal Gear Solid 3, when you reload your gun, you get an empty magazine. But you can actually throw the magazine to distract enemies. It's not just like, I'm reloading the gun now. So can you think of banal mechanics that certain games improve upon in some way like that?
Well, I want to first say I don't have an answer to this question, but I want to say that I believe the example you gave in God Hand was kind of God Hand saying how stupid climbing ladders is.
Yeah, and it was way better. It was a great idea.
Yeah, how much it wastes time, and I think the same thing with the Dark Souls and with the empty magazine clip is they're just neat gameplay elements. I think the Dark Souls one is more just knowing that they don't want to waste players' time.
Yeah, but I mean that does make it better for sure. This is not actually. I gotta think harder about stuff like this, but I gotta think. One thing I remember, this isn't actually better, but it distracts you while you're doing it, and it makes it amusing. Have you ever played a game where, like, open the door, but it's locked, and you gotta, like, hack at the door or, like, beat the door by mashing X or something until and you will open it. You just gotta, like, hit it several times, and then it's open. I remember Vice showed me the game for PS3, Wet, and that's a very Groundhouse kind of game. But there was one part, like, the actual mechanic was not improved upon, but it was easily forgivable because there's a part where, like, there's a door that's locked and it's like mash square 100 times or whatever. Or he was playing on the 360, so it's mash like B or whatever button. And as you're booting the door, the character just goes like, fucking door, like, until you finally open it. It just I've never heard a game character complain about something like that. Like, it was just pretty funny.
So in that same vein, I think it's one of the Bionic Commando recent ones where there's a dialogue that you can have with the final boss. And if you die repeatedly on the final boss, after a while you can, like, press X for quick time commands, and while he's giving the monologue, your character goes, "Shut the fuck up!"
Oh, that's great. Wow.
It's actually pretty funny.
That's fantastic.
I think also sometimes the dialogue after you've replayed it like 2 or 3 times just randomly has swear words in the place of regular nouns.
That's amazing.
Or verbs. So
I love
it's
stuff
like
that.
In case you weren't paying attention because you were bored by the text, we'll spice it up a little bit with a random, fuck.
That's great. And I think damn it, I did have something else and I lost it.
Well, I'm gonna give a shout out to, like, Dragon Quest, which is the king of, like, tedious, banal gameplay that is slowly improved, kicking and screaming over the last, like, 25 years. Because, I mean, in the original game, you had to go to a staircase and, like, push stairs in the menu to go up a staircase.
Oh God, that's like Maniac Mansion, like touch, switch, like.
Right, and those older games, they also had, like, different commands for checking versus, like, talking, instead of just having
and in Snatcher, there was look versus investigate.
Yeah, nice.
And there actually is a difference if you think about it, but, like, still, like, when you first play the game, you're like, what?
It's like look versus look closer.
Exactly, it's like, come on.
There's also random battles, of course, which is something that nobody likes in video games, but I guess mostly exists because of sprite limitations in older games. And has since been replaced by usually, like, avoidable battles on the world map in RPGs.
A lot of games have, but I know that World of Final Fantasy has random battles, and there are several games that do, and yes, they are getting kind of obnoxious.
Yeah, like most games in that vein that try to, like, try to call back to the retro JRPG style, like they usually try to come up with a workaround. Like in the latest Dragon Quest games, like I said, you can see enemies on the map, or like Arch and Elico, they have a meter that once it runs down, you don't get random encounters anymore if you keep fighting in the same area. So eventually,
Superhero League of Hoboken does that. Remember
and
Superhero League of
Hoboken? What are you talking about?
Superhero League of Hoboken. It's like the threat level is this high, and as you kill enemies, it gets lower and lower.
All right.
I've heard in Legend of Dragoon, it was kind of the opposite of that, where it wasn't like they were completely random. There was a meter. I forget where it was on the map or on your screen, but it gradually went from green to red. Mm-hmm. And the more closer to red it was, the more likely you were to be, and you were going to get into random battle. So at least you knew when they were coming. Oh. It's not as good as just being able to avoid it, but at least you're like, all right, I guess I should heal because I'm not going to make it to the end of this map before I get another battle.
I did think of actually a couple that dramatically did improve on basic concepts. One of them is the Disgaea series. On the original Disgaea for the PS2, it's a sweet game, but eventually you really do get tired of seeing the same animations again, even if it's something as basic as a more elaborate physical attack. And the magic attacks, you're just really going to deal with. But in later Disgaea games, you have the option to outright turn animations off. So even if you do your super Omega level spells, it just shows your character do a quick swipe with a sword, and then it shows like some high amount of damage. It's like, we know. And you can also speed up the animation as well, because that game is designed to grind in, so you can just really cut through that. And similarly, Xenosaga Episode 1 has, and possibly 3, has the Urda Kaiser summon, which is a good, like, 40 to 50 second summon. And you cannot skip long, elaborate animations in that game, except for that one. That one's so long, they give you an out. Also, Earthbound. This is, you mentioned this earlier, OldManStompy Earthbound with the Sword of Kings, but Earthbound is great because when you get high enough level, if you run, like when you run into an enemy, you see like a blue swirl on the screen. If for some reason they ever hit you from behind, you get a red swirl and they get first attack, and if you get them from behind, then you get a green swirl and you get first attack. But if you get high enough level, then getting them from behind and eventually even getting them from the front, you'll see the swirl and it'll just be like, you won. Like, we know you're going to kill. If it's like a level 1 enemy, it's just like, all right, we're not even going to do the battle screen.
I love that mechanic, and I'm actually surprised more games don't use that, because battles do start to get tedious when you're at high level, in the sense of it's more like the battle isn't tedious, but the transitions feel useless and unnecessary.
Yeah.
But especially with Earthbound, the battle feels tedious, though. It's like, attack this enemy, and it has the intentionally old, like, Dragon Quest format of battle, so you're just kind of menuing as the battle system. So it's like, let's just skip all of that. Like, thank you.
Yeah, so Paper Mario, I believe, also does that. You have a badge that you can, like, spin into very weak enemies and kill them automatically. And also, the example I was going to give is Wild Arms. In the later games, they have what's called the Migrant Gauge, which is a gauge that you can level up to like 20 over the course of the game, and it's a meter that you can also like increase the size of. And you have a migrant level, and all the encounters have an encounter level. And usually, if you've been picking up every treasure chest, your migrant level is one level below the encounter level. And you can push a button right before you get into a battle. You have it's like a quick time event, and if you push the button at the right time, you spend a number of points in your gauge equal to the difference between the encounter level and your level. To skip that battle. So you have like this finite resource where you can skip battles, and of course, as your level goes up, then you can also go back to older, easier areas. You can skip all the battles because you're higher level. So
nice.
Just keep hitting the button.
Oh, and actually, you know what? I remember what I was going to say earlier, and I've thought of a couple more. This is actually one of my favorites, and I almost never see this in a video game. But Super Mario RPG, its basic battle system, has a function where if you press the attack button just as you connect with the enemy, then you'll do a second hit, or at least a more powerful one. So, like, RPG battles, turn-based combat are tedious no matter what game you're playing. But Super Mario RPG actually directly rewards you for being engaged. You don't just mash the A button and then sit back. I have to admit, in Skies of Arcadia, once you choose every character's moves, you sit back and you wait for everyone's turn to be over. But in Mario RPG, if you're really on it during physical or magical attacks, then you're going to get a boost out of it. Also, the thing I had forgotten to mention was and this is getting obscure, but the original Clock Tower for the Super Famicom, that game, it like, this is the Super Nintendo, so you're not really going to have full-on cutscenes. That game has pretty gorgeous sprite work, but the story is either done in text or like with quote cutscenes. It's like still images of faces and things like that. And the opening cutscene is long. It's like, you know, we went to this mansion and we wanted to see what it would be like, and it just kind of keeps going. But when you turn on the game, you have the option to start the game or quick start the game. So when you start the game, you see that whole cutscene, then you're in the foyer of the mansion. And it's like, uh-oh, what happened? Where did everybody go? I'll go look. And then that person's gone. Oh, man, everyone's gone. I guess I better do something. And then control goes to you. But with quick start, you just start in that room standing up. Like, just play the damn game. And Clock Tower has a bunch of different endings. So thank you for that option. Yeah. Like, that's so good.
It's reminiscent of, like, 999 and those visual novels made by the same developer, where you can, like, skip through elements of the plot that you've already seen, as long as the cutscene is exactly the same. Sometimes if there are subtle differences, you still have to watch it again.
Yeah. Which gets annoying because you see the text in one word's different, and you're like, I know what you're saying. Let me skip this.
And then you've seen the part that's different, and you have to watch the whole rest of the cutscene.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, by the way, and the one last thing I wanted to throw out, it's debatable as to whether this directly answers the question, but the nature of gameplay. Like, did you ever play any of the text-only adventure games where there's no graphics at all?
Maybe. Yes, long time ago.
Like Zork or anything. Because what you
like
do
one
is...
or two.
It's a black screen, you get a command prompt. So it's like, you're standing in a room. Okay. So you type in look. And it's like, you see this, this, and this. And you see a door. And you're like, oh, okay. Open door. Like, so, you know, that kind of stuff. Well, the existence of...
Oh, you mean like Frog Fractions?
Yes, I do. But the existence of graphics improved that. Like in the old King's Quest games, you could see where you're going and even, God forbid, move your character with the directional arrows. But you could still type look, and it's like you see something in the tree or whatever. Like you could still do that. And then, you know, normally you'd have to walk up to a door and then type open door. But then the point-and-click genre was invented, where you click the touch icon and then you touch the door, or you click the eye and you click something and look at it. And even then, it makes it even more efficient, because in King's Quest VII and like Grim Fandango, there's just a one-size-fits-all cursor. So click on something and you will observe it or use it whatever you're supposed to be doing. It's great.
Yeah. I will say that as nice as that is, that like development also led to like the pixel hunt genre, which is tedious in its own way, that never existed when you only had text.
That is true.
It was in the room.
Yeah, the pixel hunt was bullshit, because sometimes you literally would be hunting for a single pixel in like King's Quest like 1 and 2. That was not cool. At this point, I've seen games like Frambo improve upon this by like with the point and click. With King's Quest V, you had to kind of keep clicking, but with something like Frambo, and a lot of new games now anyway, like if you hover your mouse over something, it'll be like look at, and if you hover it over the desk, it'll say look at desk. So like it's still kind of pixel hunting, but if you ever see that message change, it's like, oh, that's something different. And by the way, I am backtracking to Mario RPG regarding the interactivity with the battles, but I said very few games do this. Shout out to Barkley, Shut Up and Jam Gaiden for rewarding interactivity with battles as well, because not only does it reward it, but how you fight is different with each character too. It's pretty rad.
And also not requiring you to level grinds at all to beat the game.
No, like, yeah, that's a thing that not a lot of games do nowadays, but yeah, just your natural progression will level you up to something that's fair. Like, the game's never going to get crazy hard, but at the same time, you're never going to feel like you're just sleepwalking through it either. So proper level progression in natural gameplay is quite satisfying.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Barkley is friendly to the player, for those of you who have tried to find the other 3 library cards, but it is definitely not boring.
No, it is not. And another thing with Barkley is that all the enemy encounters, they're like the enemies... No, it is a random encounter, actually. No, it is a random encounter system, I think.
Yeah, it is.
But, like, you can grind in that game, but you really don't have to, which is kind of nice. And I think there are some dungeons that have enemies that are visibly on the screen. No, that is how it was. Enemies would see you and chase you, and it might be hard to avoid them, but once you kill them, they're gone. So you can actually close out of the game and reopen it, and the enemies will be back, but you're really not supposed to, and you don't have to. which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, that's all well and good. Maybe by episode 100 of this podcast, or 150 or 500, we'll get to play the sequel.
Oh, sick burn. That was a slam.
Anyway,
everyone else is the jam with the rest.
Like Vice, who is off this week.
Vice is jamming
with the rest.
Yeah.
That was my parting shot. That's the best I got.
Vice is a chump. He's a baka. He's a goddamn baka.
Doom Murderhead. All right. Anyway, that was a good conversation. But I think it's time we wrap up. So, everyone, that's the show for this week. We want to thank all our fans who contributed questions. Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own on the YouTube and SoundCloud pages, or else this podcast will get a lot shorter because we are now out of questions. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going, although it doesn't necessarily keep Vice on it. You can catch us on Thursdays on our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in pop culture. Finally, you can friend Vice as Vice the Bold, VYSETHEBOLD on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter, and maybe if you are nice enough, he'll come back to us. And you can find me as OldManStompy, basically everywhere, basically on all of those things, except for Steam. And as for you guys...
And if you friend OldManStompy, maybe Vice will come back to us. It's just relentless. So, yeah, you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can contact me if you ever want to chat it up on Twitter at Lotus Prince, all one word. And finally, if you ever want to see my some of my videos early, or get in on exclusive live streams, or even choose the next games I'm going to Let's Play, then you could hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/LotusPrince. Again, all one word.
And you can find me as PyroJackFrost or Cloud08540 on most gaming outlets.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Until next time, everyone.
Bye.